This meeting and all other meetings of this committee are open to the public. Proper notice been posted, given to the press in accordance with Wisconsin statutes, so the citizens may be aware of the time and place and the agenda of this meeting. Call to order and a roll call.
Spearings,
Yep.
Binley,
Here.
Gunderson,
Here.
Ebert,
Here.
Annabus,
Here.
Brunner. Here.
All right. Approve the minutes of June 15th.
I move to approve the minutes of visit 15th.
Yes.
Okay, I move to approve the minutes of the 15th.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to approve the minutes of the June 15th meeting. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. All right, number 3, public hearing regarding the proposed project boundaries and creation of tax incremental district number 7. In public hearing, now all we got is Jim, so.
And I can't hear.
And you
Yeah.
can hear that.
Have to make a, you're probably gonna make a motion to open the public hearing.
All right. Somebody make a motion to open the public hearing.
So moved.
Second?
Motion made, second, open the public hearing.
We'll just,
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Public hearing is open, thank you.
and we will leave it open while we would review the project plan and then the resolution as well.
Sure. So I can, you want me to go through the
Yeah, if you could.
project plan? Alrighty, so, apologize for some of you, this is the second time around.
We'll see if it changes.
Yeah, all new.
What was the previous meeting, just before this one?
The previous meeting was the meeting of the Joint Review Board. So under state statutes with a tax incremental finance district, the project plan itself is ultimately, it's approved by Plan Commission, it's approved by the Common Council, but it's also approved by the Joint Review Board, which is a 5-person board. It consists of 2 members from the city, the school district, the technical college, and the county. So all of the taxing authority within the municipality. And the reason that is because essentially what a TID does is it picks up all of the, it uses the full taxing authority of all taxing jurisdictions across the district boundary to help repay project costs within the district itself.
Thank you.
Sure. So if you look at, just starting on page 4, we'll walk through the project plan here. What we're looking at is the creation of tax incremental financing district number 7, or TID number 7. It's proposed to be created as a mixed-use district. So under state statutes, there's different types of tax incremental financing districts that are allowed. That really just depends on the makeup of the property. So a mixed-use district is suitable for commercial, industrial, and residential. So it has to have at least 2 of those in order to qualify as a mixed-use district. So as we look at the map, which if you want to just kind of jump to page 8, you can see the map of the district. The bulk of it is the Subway, pizza parcel, and that's all one parcel. Where the convenience store is going up, and the real driver for this is kind of beyond the scope of the current convenience store to ultimately attracting kind of a larger scale development, with the location being so close to Highway 10, and the thought process at this point is that it would be suitable for a hotel type development. So as we talk through the project plan, a lot of the infrastructure needs that would be needed to serve the district are kind of needed to ultimately serve not the convenience store or the Subway, but really the development beyond that, really the hotel type development. So from there, the boundary extends across the street, really to pick up a residential development to be able to allow it to be a mixed-use district. So being in a tax incremental district, doesn't do anything for the property, it doesn't change the property in any way, shape, or form. Really, it just brings it into the boundary to allow it to be mixed use. So there's no proposed development that's associated with that.
So that red on the west side of 10, is that on the other side of where all the storage buildings are? Is that,
No,
No.
they're in that? Just
No,
curiosity.
no, it's
Am I
just
looking
it turn it, the way you're looking at it, east is to the top. So
Oh,
if you
right
turn
down.
it to the right, then you're looking at,
Oh, I see.
yeah. So it's the parcel with the
Yeah, yeah,
subway
yeah.
now,
I
and
don't
then
know
it's
why I was
also the
looking
one
here where it was
house.
shaded in,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay.
Getting back to page 4 here, what we're looking at is, and this is just an estimate right now. So is an estimate of a little over $809,000 of infrastructure costs to, within the project plan. It's anticipated that that would be completed in 2 phases, and as I'll talk about, most of the infrastructure costs that we're looking at is in that second phase.
Hi.
And that's really kind of as development occurs. So by creating a tax incremental financing district, you're not obligating the city to any of these project costs that are being discussed. What's the benefit of a tax incremental financing district is that it allows you a repayment source for those project costs if the development were to occur and if the infrastructure needs were there. So we have to identify what those infrastructure needs potentially could be as part of this. So that's what we're doing here. Under the statute, you have 15 years from the date that the resolution approving the project plan is approved by the Common Council, which is slated for September 21st, to make those expenses. Once you go beyond the 15 years, you're not able to make any further expenses. In terms of development potential that we're looking at, what we've identified in the plan is approximately $3.9 million of development that's potential within that district. Now, what I will say is that that is a backed-into number in order to support $809,000 worth of infrastructure costs. Really, right now, the only known development is the convenience store, and the estimate that's listed here for that development is about $400,000. So the rest of it would be looked at within that hotel development, which is significant for a smaller sized hotel development. So what that tells you is a couple of different things. Either, number one, if a hotel were to come into this parcel and it would be valued less than $3.5 million, either the hope would be you may not need as much infrastructure needs, you may be able to cut your cost below that $809,000. If that's not possible, the answer then would that be that the hotel development would have to share in the infrastructure costs. In order to be able
We'll
to
get
make
into that
the-
when you get through the actual projects that have to take place.
Yep.
We'll get into that a little bit more.
Yep. And then based on, if that were to happen, what we're looking at is that the district would be able to close out in the year 2031, which would be 4 years earlier than the maximum life of the TID. Jumping ahead to page 10. What page 10 shows you is the total value of the parcels that are within the boundary, the base value. So the value as it exists today. So the total estimated base value you see on the bottom in yellow is $533,453, and that's equalized value. Excuse me, most of that is the subway parcel. Taking that a step further, if you look at page 11, what the city is limited to, and all municipalities are limited to this under the state statutes, is in terms of what you're limited to for creating TIDs. The way that it works, it's called the 12% test, and the way it works is you look at your total equalized value and you take 12% of that number, and the amount of increment of your existing TIDs, so the growth from the base value of your existing TIDs, so TID 4, TID 5, plus the base value, so that 533,000 of what you're looking at within the new TID cannot exceed 12% of your total equalized value. Okay. Now, you just created earlier this year TID number 6. TID number 7 will also have a 2015, 1/1/2015 effective date. So the way it works when you have two TIDs that are created within the same year is you actually do the equalized value test independent of each other. So you look at one just for TID 6 and one just for TID 7. But when we're looking at TID 7, We don't count anything to do with TID number 6 because there is no increment. Does that make sense? Okay. Jumping ahead then to page 18. You have this is the estimated project list that's we're talking about. We have some minor costs in year one. You know, really in terms of infrastructure, what you're looking at is some sidewalk improvements along West Main Street. The bulk of the costs are associated in phase 2, which we have slated somewhere between years 2 and 5 of the TID. We're picking, I just picked 2017, but again, you know, these project costs would 100% be dictated by the pace of development of a potential hotel. So most of it is sewer, but you have potential water main, storm sewer, and then road cost as well. That's a significant portion of that. And the road cost that's listed in here is less what the developer of the convenience store is already paying for the existing road work that's being done there right now.
So on a quick note, the work that's being done there on Lakeshore Drive right now, it's being done to service the convenience store that's being built there, but the TID itself is not going to produce any incentive to the convenience store, so there is no payment to them at all or any offset on infrastructure. The city had entered into a developer's agreement with Outagamie Co-op Services, and by city ordinance, if anyone requests to extend water and sewer mains, whoever requests that has to pay 100% of the construction costs. So we're right now extending the water main and the sewer main. It's roughly 150 feet, and that's 100% at Outagamie Co-op Services cost. We're also widening the road. It's essentially been about 1.5 lanes wide, and the intersection at Lakeshore and Main hasn't been very wide to accommodate any truck traffic or increase in traffic. But what we were able to get out of Outagamie Co-op Services was a split on those costs too, for the road and the intersection. So the developer paid us 1/3 of what we estimate to be that cost, and the city's picking up 2/3. Having said that, the projects that would be included in this TID are sidewalk extension, which would basically extend the sidewalk on West Main. Right now it ends about 1.5 houses short of Lakeshore Drive, so this would finish that up all the way to the newly reconstructed intersection. A city business advertising sign could be located near the park property, and if that's the case, we could look into, I think we even had set that aside for TID 6 with industrial, trying to get advertising out on Highway 10. Whatever new business locates to this new development in TID 7 could also have some of that advertising. But then when we look down at sewer, water, storm sewer, and roadway costs, the roadway cost that's listed there, it includes the entire cost to extend the road or reconstruct the road about 700 feet. And the note on here is that this cost is less the 1/3 that Outagamie Co-op Services has paid for the first 300 feet of road. So essentially it would cover the city's share right now, which I believe we're estimating around $60,000. And then it would also finish up to get, I think it's like 750 feet to get down to the hitching post or to the end of this property. So that's what those costs are there. The sewer and the water are being extended as far as they can right now to service the convenience store, and just as far to allow for a gravity sewer system to work. What that means is if there is future development on the site, or if any of the homes that are in the town would like to get into the city sewer system, the lay of the land there gravity wouldn't allow sewer to just run to the city's main, because there's a hill there. It's not real obvious, but if you take a look at it, it just wouldn't work. With that, we'd end up having to put in like a lift station, a booster pump, and that's where bulk of the $330-some thousand is. Basically, the convenience store is being constructed now, and we're putting in the infrastructure just to accommodate that. Any of these costs here are really tied to any future development that happens on this site, and there's about 6 to 6.5 acres left. if development happens, they're going to need the road to be reconstructed and they're going to need water and sewer to be hooked up. If development doesn't happen, we don't have to do these projects either. But with that, what I also mentioned is Outagamie Co-op Services, because they requested the water and sewer, they had to pay for it. So these costs that are listed here are the costs to complete this work, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the city or the TID would ultimately be responsible for them either. We're just identifying them as necessary costs for potentially necessary projects in the future. Does that help? So there is no constructing roads and then hoping that development comes. It's really going to be tied to, once we have something in hand that's ready to, shovel ready, that's when we'll
Right.
move forward on the infrastructure, which is really a good situation to be in for us.
Yeah, it's not like the olden days prior to the housing market crash where, that type of stuff would be done and with the hopes that something would happen. So those days are gone. You're waiting until something is in hand before you start to talk about the infrastructure, actually installing it. So, taking that a step further, if you flip to page 21. The way that these costs potentially could be funded would be potentially a bank note in 2015, although that is really for planning purposes. Well, they both are, but any costs in 15 I think are relatively minimal, and the biggest piece of that was that advertising, so that may or may not occur. Really, again, most of those costs are happening as the potential hotel development occurs. So what we have from a planning standpoint is 2017, where a general obligation bond would be issued. $715,000 would be for project costs. There's estimated financing expenses associated with that, as well as what's called capitalized interest, which essentially is borrowing for the first 2 years worth of interest payments, and it's not preferable, but it's definitely a common thing within tax incremental financing districts. And the reason that occurs is whenever you have a development go in, so say for instance this convenience store, for tax purposes would be on the books in 2015 if it's constructed by, relatively constructed by the end of this year. You're not going to actually see any tax increment from that, any tax dollars flowing into the district until 2017. So there's always a 2-year lag between when a development occurs and when you actually see those tax dollars flowing back into the district. So if you have to make expenses and you have to issue debt for that, you're going to start incurring interest. So you have to, capitalize that interest to be able to make the district cash flow. And again, this is all planning estimate at this point in time. Page 22 shows you a breakdown of the development assumptions themselves. The $400,000 is a little bit more of a known cost, although it's still an estimate until something actually happens there for the convenience store. The rest of it is for the hotel development, and it's a fairly high value for a hotel development. So again, if it comes in less than that, you're looking at a cost sharing agreement with the development. The next page shows you the total value of that $3.9 million worth of development in terms of how much tax increment it would generate. So what you're looking at is a total future value of all the tax increment from that $3.9 million at the full tax level of all the taxing districts. So at a rate of $25.10 a thousand, you have a future value of a little over $1.7 million. Okay. Then finally, the cash flow, which is really kind of the crucial piece to this, and that's on page 24. So within the district, the district itself is its own, kind of its own entity that has to cash flow and be able to maintain revenues and expenses within it. So you look at your total revenues coming into the district on the far left-hand side in green, your expenses in the middle in blue, and then the balance on the far right-hand side. The real key to this spreadsheet, and the key to it when we create it, is looking at that cumulative balance within the the TID. So you never want your cumulative balance to be negative, or if it is, very slightly negative. You can have negative cash flow at any one given year as long as you have positive balance. The TID closes at the point where your cumulative balance exceeds your obligations within the district. So in this case, it's the amount of principal that would be outstanding with those two debt issuances. So the way it works, kind of going from left to right, is from a revenue standpoint, you have your bond revenues coming in 2015 and 17 to help pay for your construction expenses. The tax increment revenue starts coming in 2017 if you have development happening in 15, and then it jumps again in 2019 when the hotel development would be online. So you see the total value of that tax increment coming in on an annual basis. You have your capitalized interest in there as well. So total revenue is going down the far right-hand column of the green section. Under the blue columns are your expenses, which is the repayment of the debt that would be issued for the most part, as well as the paying of your construction expenses. So you can see that repayment occurring. So total expenses in the far right side of the blue column, the last blue column, total expenditures. So total revenues less your total expenditures gives you your annual cash balance, and then your cumulative is a culmination of every year. So you can see that in 2031, just running down the page, your cumulative cash balance would exceed the amount of principal that you have outstanding, so you'd be able to call that debt, pay it off, and close the district. And we always want to build in, from a planning standpoint, a little bit of cushion. We never want to show you a closing, say, in 2034, with the maximum lifespan of 2035, because that really hamstrings you in terms of any sort of change in development. Anything happens, and you're not going to be able to fully prepay the obligations within the TID prior to it closing. So I know that was kind of a fast run through of it. Any questions? Yes.
You've mentioned a hotel several times. Is that purely hypothetical? Is there something for us to think that a hotel might be coming?
Yeah, that site is open, there's 6 to 6.5 acres it's open for retail development. One of the items that we've had as we scan the offerings in the city is that one of the things that's missing is a hotel or any kind of a lodging of any type at all. And the short answer is that we do not have any development in hand, but we are actively seeking or hunting a hotel, I guess you could say. There are some hotels that specialize in smaller communities with smaller type hotels. One of them that we're angling for and aiming to be like is the Cobblestone Hotel that's in Clintonville. It's a smaller, usually they're 12 to 20 hotel rooms, but it looks and feels like a bigger hotel.
I'm familiar with Cobblestone in Durand, Wisconsin.
Okay, yeah.
And it's a great place.
Yeah.
Great hotel.
Yep, and I stayed at the one in Clintonville before we moved out here too. We stayed there a couple times, and it's nice. But right now, as we're looking to seek out a hotel or hunt for a hotel, one of the things that they look for, or any developer looks for right away, is what kind of an incentive can you offer? And the main tool that the city has available is TIF.
Mm-hmm.
The reason we're here in September is ideally 3-4 years ago, or maybe even 5 years ago, the city probably should have created a TIF district on this site so that when the subway was built, you'd be able to capture that value with the subway. And I think a TID had been discussed at the time, it just was never followed through.
Right.
And while we're here now, the OCS is planning on having their convenience store up and running this year yet. And if that's the case, that means all of the value to be created with the convenience store is going to be created this year. And this is the month that we need to create a TID to be able to capture the actual development that's happening there. Because if we wait until October, November, we can create a TID that's going to look at what value exists there on January 1st of next year. By that time, just like the subway's already been built and we've lost that opportunity there, the convenience store is going to be built and roughly 400-some thousand of new value is going to be lost to us to be able to capture.
Right.
I know I should say lost because We would still get our
Applied to the
20-some% share, the school would get their share, and the tech would
Right.
get their share. But if we're able to capture that, that means 100% of the new taxes will come to us to be able to be used for improvements. So we're looking for a hotel, but any type of development there is going to need these infrastructure improvements, and we're going to need to pay for them, and this is the best vehicle we have. Really, probably the only
It is.
vehicle we have to be able to do
TIF
that.
is, TIF in Wisconsin is really the biggest tool in the economic development toolbox. I mean, it's kind of, you could argue one of your only tools, so.
Yep.
That's kind of all I had on the project plan. So hopefully it's consistent with my first run through.
I mean, just basically summarize that, I mean,
It was good.
it makes sense to do it because you're not gonna spend it unless they come,
Yep,
Yeah.
but you have the ability to do so should that happen.
yeah.
We're not spending money until actually something gets built, because, as you said, where it stops now, that already is there, and might as well take advantage of that.
Right.
Makes sense to me.
Yep.
Anybody else got anything? Do we have a motion to approve, or what do we need?
You do have the public hearing open yet, so if you, the first thing you'd probably have to do is have a motion to close the public hearing.
Okay. Nobody else got anything? Okay. Then I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
I motion.
I'll second it.
Motion been made and seconded, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried, thank you. Now I'll entertain a motion to approve tax incremental district number 7.
It's a resolution, and I believe the number is 571. But there's a resolution that designates the proposed boundaries and approves the project plan for TID number 7.
Okay, what you said.
Yep, so you'd be looking for a motion to approve resolution 571.
Okay.
I make a motion to approve resolution 571.
I'll second it.
Motion been made and seconded to approve resolution 571. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, gentlemen. Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, see you
Very good.
again.
Yeah, you too. See you soon.
All right, we'll go to number 5, discussion of possible sign action and permit for League of Boaters, 701 North Mill. I think this is past tense, but we still
Yeah.
have formality here.
Basically, Mitchell Automotive had a sign up, they had a conditional use approved by you. What you will see is, as part of the transition from Mitchell Automotive to Wiega Motors, which is with the new owner, a new conditional use and a new sign. Now, what happened was, they took down the sign that had been there and then put up a sign in the same location. Thanks, John, take care. The sign, they had called us to inspect the sign, and we had sent them the ordinance that says you need a permit to get the sign. And when they called, they didn't have a permit filled out, they were just ready to concrete the sign in, and from what it looks like, it meets all of your standards for signs. But what we had mentioned to them was, you need a permit, and when they looked at the ordinance, they said, oh, that's right. The penalty for getting a permit after you put a sign up is you double the permit fee. So on that permit, it says, you know what, it didn't pop in on there. Was something interesting. With the way they filled that out, some of the, we had to keep reprinting it, some of the stuff came through. But it's a $25 permit, and then it's $1 for every square foot over 20. I should take a look at the don't, because it doesn't have it on this copy. But it came out to be, I think it's a $35 sign, and he cut us a check for $70. But I did give him the condition that he basically asked if it's okay to put concrete in. And I said, well, you gotta get a permit, and it's not officially approved until it's approved by the plan commission. Having said that, every condition that you would have on in the ordinance is basically met. Like I said, they just took out the
So
old
pour it
sign
at your
posts
own
and put
risk,
it in. Right.
Yeah, you
Just
really
in
wouldn't know
case-
the difference.
Just
if you
in
didn't know the
case
name.
we
Yeah.
wanna be jerks, right?
Yeah.
Is Randy still the owner?
No,
We sold it
yeah.
to
No, he
this,
sold it.
to this.
It's got it
Baron.
right here, it's got it,
Mr. Thompson. Yep.
Thompson, yeah.
And there's a side note, but related to the transition, is there's an ongoing conversation about the fence that was required
Yeah,
for
that's
Mitchell.
what was my question. was.
So, that is coming to you at your next meeting.
I see a stack of partial fence on the lot right now.
Yeah. That's another item for another meeting.
Is this guy, from town here, from
Uh,
City of Wywiga?
Lives right out north of, on 110,
His spouse is the postmaster in town.
yeah. Anyway.
So are you looking for a motion
approve
to
this, yeah.
basically,
Recommend approval of the sign permit.
Yeah.
We have a picture of the sign there for you, but
so I'll make a motion to approve the sign permit.
Second,
Motion
I
made
guess
and seconded
contingent,
to
do you want a
approve site.
contingent on there about the double fee, or you don't care about
Oh,
that?
he-
You already got
he
it?
already
check.
paid it.
All right.
got a check for it,
All
yeah.
right.
He already paid it.
I didn't know if you needed that in the motion.
No, the ordinance lays that out, so.
Okay?
Motion made and seconded, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried, thank you. Now we'll discuss possible action on the recommendation for corner lot zoning revisions. And we got three parts to this. And basically what this is, we have several places in town that live on a corner lot. And with our present ordinances, all roadways are 25-foot setback. And when it comes to a corner lot, it causes a problem
No?
for the side lot.
Yeah, suppose.
So basically, there's three parts to this. We have to identify the front yard, basically, and which our attorney and that has decided that a front yard will be the same as the house next door to you. So if there's two houses facing the same
okay.
direction, the
But on
side
the
lot
corner
will be,
But on the corner lot, you could have that each way.
So,
Okay, go ahead.
yeah,
yeah, there's these three items.
yeah, but they won't be facing the same way.
Yeah.
There could be a house where the house facing the same direction. Yeah, they can have a house behind them, but
Yeah.
it'll be facing the opposite direction.
If you look at this sheet, it's page 3 and it's coded 6A. Basically, the route that this is taken is, there are I would say 4 or 5 property owners in town that would like to build a garage on a corner lot. And 3 of them had come and asked that the ordinance be changed. And the changes that need to be made are, first, our ordinances identify on a corner lot a primary front yard and a secondary front yard, but it doesn't say how you get to decide that. The city attorney had recommended language to the ordinance committee on this sheet. He basically, there were 2 recommendations given. One was let the building inspector decide, and the thought was they didn't want to have anybody unilaterally just being able to decide whose front is which. But the city attorney had language that said basically on a corner lot, the front lot line shall be along the same street as the front lot line of the immediately adjacent interior lot. So you're on the corner, your immediately adjacent neighbor, whichever way their house faces, whether it's one street or the other, that would be your front lot. And if you're adjacent to 2 or more interior lots, it would be the street frontage with the smallest dimension. So if you have on a corner, one street is 60 feet and the other one is 100 feet, it would be the shortest one. So it's language to identify which one is your primary front yard. Then, the recommendation is to take a look at your secondary front yard, which is not the front, but a side or
Right.
not the primary front. The thought there is, right now, the residential setbacks are 25 feet from the road, or from your property line. Your property that's on the road fronts the road. The recommendation was from the ordinance committee to reduce that 25 feet to something. That went to the city council, and the city council had added on there, they would like to reduce it from 25 feet to 15 feet. The city council didn't officially act on this and make it law. What they acted on then was to send it to the third step, which is to the plan commission, for your review on these 3 recommendations. And then from here, it would go back to the city council if you have action on these recommendations. The 3 recommendations are, again, identify a primary front yard, which is this language that was recommended by the city attorney. Number 2 is your secondary yard, rather than having a 25-foot setback, the council is asking you to consider a 15-foot setback. And then the 3rd item is, right now you can't build an accessory building, so a garage or a shed, in your front yard. And what that means is, on the secondary side, if you're going to reduce the setback to 15 feet, allow a garage or an accessory building to be built into that gap between 15 feet and your house, or 15 and 25. Will basically allow you to build it into your secondary yard. So there's 3 parts to it. All of them are for your review. The info that you have in your packet, it shows some of the homes. You also have a note from Dennis Yorkson. He has a house on 301 East South Street. He would like to have that secondary side yard reduced. And then the packet of information that you have, which says item number 6, it says page 1 through 17, or page 17 pages. It's information that back in January 2014, so a year and a half ago, the ordinance committee had reviewed it to take it up for potential changes. Basically, it's a list of items that would allow for people to build garages on corner lots closer to the road than what's currently allowed. And we filtered through the 5 items down to those 3 that are listed on the agenda. And a lot of the backup information has info on other communities, like Clintonville allows for a secondary setback, which is 20 feet, and their primary is 25. Thiensville, Prairie du Chien allow up to, or down to 15 feet. There's other communities that do that. It's just a lot of backup information that supports these 3 recommendations that were made.
Okay. What do you wanna do, this in 3 motions, or the whole thing, or?
It's up to you guys if you wanna, maybe you wanna go through each of the 3.
Somebody got any questions?
Discuss it and,
Yeah, I have a question. The, if I understand it, the primary front lot line is basically the way the house faces onto
Yeah.
the street.
well,
As long as the other house next to you is facing the
Yeah.
same way.
You got this, yours is a good example, you're on a corner. The house
So
next to you faces the same way.
You're
yours
not a
And
good
the-
example.
Right.
and.
I'm not a
Alright.
good example.
So what that's saying is if you
Example.
built a garage in your backyard, or built a building, instead of 25 feet, you could go 15 feet.
Facing what street for the
The
garage?
primary,
The opposite of what your house faces.
Or facing some,
The
or
garage
some
can
setback.
face either way.
Yeah,
So
it's
could the-
mainly due to the setbacks. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't care which way you point the garage,
Right.
the
Yeah.
setback
Setback.
is
Right.
coming
you
from.
can put the door
Right.
anyway,
That
as long as
primary-
it's 15 feet.
Right.
So my front faces on High Street.
Yep,
If I would build a garage onto Birdsall,
Yeah.
the back street, we're
no,
considering.
no.
Are you talking the side
You're
street,
talking the
Mill
street
Street?
behind, we're talking the
That would
street
be
beside you.
different. That would be different.
That's the difference.
The street aside me, Mill Street.
Mill Street, yeah.
Okay, would that garage entrance come off High Street or Mill
Doesn't
Street?
make any difference the way you build it, as long as it's 15 feet off the lot line.
Well, right now-
Right away.
Right now it's
Right now, it
25
has to be
feet.
25 feet off of the lot, the property line. And
I
what they're
think the
saying is
15
to try to
feet
get
will
down
resolve most of it, won't it?
15.
Yeah,
Well,
Then it probably don't matter, does it? Is there, how many corner lots wouldn't be able to fit it in within 15 foot? Because then they could come, as long as they're within, if that was changed from 25 to 15, how many of these that they're applying, wouldn't they don't care which one's the primary one?
yeah, it don't matter, difference which is,
Because you're,
as long as you got 15 feet, they're okay.
well,
We got at least 4
Go
of them
ahead.
that could
so
build.
I have a problem with the 15 feet. If you look at most vehicles, they're over 15 feet. We have an ordinance that says you cannot park your vehicle on the sidewalk. So if the setback is 15 feet, you've got to remove that other ordinance then.
You said something about sidewalk.
Right.
If you had a sidewalk.
Well,
Yeah,
even if you don't have a
because
sidewalk,
like
no.
South Street one doesn't.
Right, but even the ordinance, it
Mary.
says, in absence of a sidewalk, 4 feet beyond the curb line. So
Oh, to allow for as if
you have to
it
allow
were-
4 feet. So if it was 20 feet,
Right away.
then you'd be able to park a vehicle, a truck, and not be in that right of way.
zone.
Because otherwise, in my opinion, you'd have to take this ordinance out and say, if you live on Main Street, you can park on the sidewalk.
Right.
To make it consistent through the city.
It just, again, you can't ever try and figure out all the things that may ever come up, so you just can do your best.
Right.
But like you said, my house is a bad example. One could argue, now I don't have a house on the park side, but let's just say there was one on the park side. Someone could come there and debate with me which is the front of my house.
And
Yeah,
what's
the way yours,
interesting,
it's,
Yeah.
at the
Because
ordinance,
we come in from
yeah.
Parker, and that's where the garage is, and that's where we park, but if I wanted to be a stickler about it and it was to my advantage, I'd say, no, that's the front of my house, even though we'd never come through that door unless we gotta bring a couch in.
and that's why we're looking at this language, because at the ordinance committee, they asked, so what is the front? Is it up to somebody to decide, or is it your address, or your front door, or where your driveway is? And the answer for 4 or 5 different properties was,
15.
none of them had the house facing with their address, you know, not, 2 of them didn't have the same situation, it was all,
Well, again, you
it's tough.
you can try and debate and figure all day long, and 10 years from now, there'll be one that comes up, it's like, well, I never thought of that, and they can still bring it back then and ask for a deviance or from that ordinance, right? We're just
They'd
gonna
ask
try
you
and
to
have something
change
that makes
the-
sense.
Yeah, and
I
the
mean,
other
whatever
point with
change it
these,
to.
there's 4 or 5 of them, all of them would be allowed to build a garage right now by the current ordinance, but it would be like in an inconvenient spot to them. And so what the request is, rather than having to build where the current ordinance says they're supposed to build, they're asking to get some relief and reduce the setback on one side.
I guess what I gotta say is, this has been discussed at length through 2 meetings. And the 4 or 5 that this is gonna affect, it's 15 feet. If you make it any different, they can't do it. So
Is that where the
in
15 foot
essence,
come
yeah,
in?
15 feet is what we
Because they
need.
just don't have any more room in it.
There's no more room on the.
No matter what you designate as the primary front of the house,
Yeah.
it wouldn't matter. So
No.
those
Well-
people there, even if you designated what
If
the
you
front of the
leave-
house is, they still need the 15 foot
For the type
Yeah.
of garages they're
where they
looking to
want to
build.
build them.
For what they want to build.
They're all
Where and
corner
how big?
lots, they're all
For what
the
they wanna
same
build.
situation.
I'm just trying to understand, Jack, that, so if you take the first step, which was to designate what becomes the front of the house,
Yeah,
or the primary road, let's say
Yeah.
that, right? So if that was done, these folks still couldn't build where they want to unless you also change it to 15 foot.
They can build garages the way it sits today, but they would rather, when you reduce the setback, however much you reduce the setback, that's how much room it gives them to be able to build where they want to build.
The one on South, that one's locked, I mean, that one's so small that
yeah,
there's no way that they'd have an option.
yeah, he
I don't
doesn't
see
have an
any
option at all.
Well, you'd go,
And
you'd
it's
have
the
a
yard is
detached garage
cluttered.
in the backyard.
Right.
Is what it would be, so.
What backyard, you've seen it?
Yeah.
It's
Right.
something-
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I know what you're saying, but yeah, there's,
That's why we're here talking about the ordinance itself.
So I guess just out of curiosity, probably both you two, because you were at the meeting, maybe somebody else was. I mean, what was the general debate theme as to, I mean, is it kind of lukewarm? Is it,
Well,
I
we-
think this is a
we
good
went
idea? Are we
measured-
concerned?
We went and measured them all, and 3 of the 5, if it doesn't go to 15 feet, they can't build, period.
Isn't that,
They
thought
they
you were
can
saying
build.
something
So-
different.
So
No,
the
they
difference,
can't.
they can,
No.
Again.
well,
can
Ain't
build-
enough room.
no, they can, because if they couldn't build, they could go get a variance then, which is what you're saying. But so the difference is, you can build a smaller garage on the property, but what they're looking to do is build it in a spot that they wanna build it, at a size that they wanna build it to. And right now, the current ordinance says you have room on your property to build a garage, regardless of how big. And so the request is, and I could just tell you, the discussion has been, for sure, we need to identify what's primary yard.
That makes
For
sense.
sure, they would like to reduce the setback on that secondary side. So there's going to be some type of relief for the people that wanna build a garage. The only thing that hadn't been discussed or an agreement made at the ordinance committee, because I think there were just two people there, they couldn't agree on whether they wanted that to be 15 feet or 20 feet. And so they didn't make a recommendation at all. But when it went to the full council, I think we had four members were there, and 4 members voted to say, so we're okay setting the primary front yard, and we're okay reducing one of the setbacks, which is what's being asked. And then they also said, let's set that then at 15 feet. And then that's why it comes to you then, but it's not, nothing has been set in stone.
No,
though.
I'm just trying to
It's
get a
recommended
general,
For you,
there's a whole lot more conversation, we had 2 meetings on it than what we've had here today, I just was trying to get a little more.
yeah. Well, we've had
What am
more
I
than that
not-
too, because
what
it's
am I
been
not
since January
understanding?
2014, it's been out there too. And as it's been out there, more properties have requested the ability to build a garage where they
But I
want
mean,
to
what
build a garage.
Nick's point about, you have to take the, I guess, largest vehicle that someone probably could have, and if there truly is that 4 foot from the curb, the 20 makes sense to me.
Right.
Problem is, it doesn't help those people. So again, doesn't go for a variance from that, but
then, does the person have to park in front of their garage? When you have a
Yeah,
garage, you
that's
park
the-
in it, I understand the whole thing, but if push come to shove, you just have to park at least halfway in your garage.
Just to
Am I-
clarify, if you have a sidewalk, that means the sidewalk and the right of way is being used 10 to 12 feet. So you can't park 12 feet away from the curb. If you don't have a sidewalk, you can park within the right of way, you just have to be 4 feet from the curb.
Right.
So, and one of the examples of maybe some of a headache or a confusion with that is Ms. Hilscotter has a property that has sidewalk that runs on half of it. And so for the northern half or the northern third of her property, you can't park on the sidewalk. What she's looking to do is build a garage that's south of that, which essentially would say if you don't have sidewalk in that section, you can park in the right of way, you just have to be 4 feet from the curb.
Right.
If the right of way is 10 to 12 feet wide, that means that if you don't have a sidewalk, no matter what the setback is, you get an extra 8 feet to park your vehicle. Does that make sense?
No.
It's,
No.
if, you-
Makes
well, it
sense at all.
doesn't make sense, but
No.
that's the way it's written though. It
Where do
doesn't
you get the
say,
8 feet? The sidewalk right away is 4 feet. Where are
The-
you getting 8
No.
feet?
I probably got, well, it might be, I'm just trying to think of my crappy old sidewalk. It's probably 3 foot from the western side of it, and if that's a couple foot, so if you go from the curb to the east side of my sidewalk, I never measured it, but I bet you that's 5, 6 foot.
the
Yeah.
easiest,
Without the sidewalk, it'd only be 4, so
I know
it'd be
this 'cause
somewhere
I
in the
let my
middle.
dog stop there.
So, huh?
Now you know.
39.
No, I just, those maple trees have got that thing, it's cobblestone.
No, I
Anyway.
just, as an example of Kay's lot, I measured that 15 times already. And from the center of the road to the right of way to the sidewalk, then it measured 15 feet after the sidewalk, the 4 foot right of way or the sidewalk. The 15 feet, that works perfect for her. If you make it 20, she can't build.
Not where she wants to.
Well, on this diagram, I'm
and
trying
let's look
to,
at her diagram. So the
Which one?
difference, it's the very last page.
I see 21 from curb, minus 4.
And this is from,
I don't think those measurements are right.
this is from a year and a half ago. So
Oh.
the only reason why I refer to it is to talk
It's
about
gonna
where
be
the
on the
sidewalk
northeast
is.
side of your property, from looking at the pool, or
It
no,
is.
southeast side, right?
It would be exactly where the shed is right now, and it would be moved in more to towards my house. So it wouldn't be closer to the road, it would be closer to my house. But I can't do anything because I don't have enough footage.
But here it's got 21 foot from curb.
Yeah, I don't
What-
know where they got that measurement, I don't think that's right.
this is what they had turned in, but the only reason why I refer to this is because, and the setback that's required or requested on this is changed because they're looking to back it up further from the curb today. So where it says 9 foot setback, that's not correct. That's what we were talking about a year and a half ago. They're requesting a 15-foot setback. Now, when you look at where her sidewalk is, what I was talking about was the ordinance that limits where you can park your vehicle. So on her end, you can see that this is north is actually, if you turn it,
Yeah.
where there's sidewalk, you can't park on the sidewalk. And the sidewalk is up to 11 feet away from the curb. So that means that 11 feet from the property line to the curb, you can't park on. Where there's not sidewalk, which is then to the
South
to the
of that.
right, to the south, the parking restriction is that you have to park 4 feet away from the curb. So in her situation, where there's sidewalk, you have to be 11 feet away from the curb. Where there's not sidewalk, you have to be 4 feet away. So in this case, 7 feet of the right of way is, they can park their vehicle in there.
So Patrick, explain to me, please,
Yeah.
that since that sidewalk is a private sidewalk, and not city sidewalk.
Yeah, it's still in the
if
city
I
right
would-
away.
If I would take the sidewalk out, would that make a difference?
I don't think it would make a difference on this at all because the garage is proposed where you don't have sidewalk. Now, the sidewalk, because it's in the right of way, you can take it out if it's not in the city's master plan for sidewalks. And I don't know off the top of my head if it is or not. If it is, it has to stay. If it's not, you can take it out. But the garage, you're not looking at building the garage. You're looking
Where
at
the
south
sidewalk
of the sidewalk. So the consideration here would be, if you're looking at how long a vehicle might be, they're going to have, for her garage, if it's built there, whatever your setback is, plus up to 4 feet away from the curb, so plus 7 feet. Just in this situation here. So if it's a 15-foot setback,
Well, that's where Nick was
she
saying
has
20 foot.
22 feet to park.
I mean, that was,
If it's 20 feet, you could fit a car not on the sidewalk. That's the difficulty in looking at one property or even 4 properties and then saying, well, can one guy park and one lady can't park, and that's,
this is just a silly question though. Isn't that what variances are for though? Or not?
I've
Like,
already
and-
gone that road.
Oh.
It
A
doesn't
variance-
work well.
Okay, but was that the crowd that was listening? I mean, but
It's-
isn't it what variances are for, is to say there are exceptions and do they make sense? Or
To a
don't we
certain
like
point,
doing it?
to a certain
Yeah,
point.
that'd be
Because
like
once you create a,
$25.
it's by the law. The state law sets out what your conditions are, and it would basically be, if you don't have room on your property to build, then you could get a variance, or if your property is sloped or,
so what's let's debate this a little bit, the 4-foot rule. That may be what the rule is, but what's its in purpose? A
Basically,
place
the
to push
sidewalk.
snow?
Every one of them I went and measured, I measured from the sidewalk.
Right.
The road, the curb, the sidewalk,
But if there's not,
then I
a-
measured 15 feet.
if there's not a sidewalk, it says we gotta keep,
But it-
what is the intent of the 4 feet? Is it just for a place to push snow? I guess I'm trying to
Yeah.
understand what
Yes,
the
it
4
is.
feet is.
it's to try to not have people parking where their bumper hangs to the curb or to the road. So when you're picking up garbage, it's an ordinance that
Okay.
keeps people
Oh, it's
out of the road. Like in the winter, you don't let people
Yep, yep.
park on the road overnight.
I'm
It's
just
to
trying
keep
to-
them out of there. Now, when you talk about sidewalk, usually the sidewalk is placed, well, always it's placed in the right of way, which isn't private property. So usually it's 10 to 12 feet. So you have the curb, but the city has 10 to 12 feet of right of way up into your front yard, or what looks like your
That's
front yard.
only true when it comes to not shoveling snow.
Or cutting the grass.
or cutting grass.
Or cutting grass, right?
Right.
Then it's mine.
That's,
Yeah.
Or if it needs to be repaired, right?
right.
And
Oh,
so
yes.
the setback, so the number you're talking about is, it's from your property line, and that means wherever the road right of way is, if it's 10 feet, in this case, it's 11 feet off of Mary Street for the Hillscotter property, that's where your property line is, and then that's where the setback.
So, I get the thing about, and just toss out one more thing. Again, if you look at her place, it probably don't matter, right?
Yeah, it does matter, because it's.
Well, I mean, as it's written today, but if it was 15 foot instead of 20, 25, I mean, in all practical purposes, the only people that are there are kids. I mean, could you write it in there, it's 15 foot with the understanding there still will not be anything parked within 4 feet of the curb? I mean, is that even
Well,
reasonable?
that ordinance would still be there, so you wouldn't have to
That's-
condition that.
That's an ordinance anyway.
Yeah.
You don't have on this, which, I'm assuming the overhead doors are facing Mary?
Yeah, they would
Hope
be.
that-
Well, and so they requested.
It's her builder, she wants it all
Yeah.
to get our put.
Yeah,
I didn't catch any of this.
So this, what we're looking at here is from a year and a half ago. And this
Right, but-
packet says from a year and a half ago.
All I'm asking is,
Yeah.
which way do your overhead doors face?
Would they?
You don't have any
they
right now.
would,
Would they face? That's what I'm
they
trying to say.
would
Face
face
Mary.
Mary.
Yeah, that's what I said. And all this other talk. Okay.
Maybe that's where, have we gone through those three? And we're just on the setback now? Is that where we're at?
I think basically what I'm hearing is everybody is in favor of detached buildings. I haven't heard anybody say that
No.
they're opposed to building detached. And I haven't heard anybody say that they're opposed to the lawyer's language for a front yard.
Just the debate over
It's
the
just a
setback.
debate over the setback
And what that amount should be?
and what the amount should be. Whether it's 15 or 20.
Let me ask, what is the traditional purpose for 25? Is it so you don't get a blind corner, basically?
So it's a little bit more broad even than that. So the purpose of a zoning code is to promote orderly development, and so that you don't have one house that's 8 feet from the road, another that's 100 feet. Right now, we just have a front setback for residential properties that's 25 feet.
There's
And
more
it's-
than one
it's-
reason. I mean, visual, safety, snow.
Yeah.
15 feet from the corner seems to me might affect visibility of some intersections.
Well, it depends on where it's at, but like, again, I bet you if we measured my garage, I don't know if I got 20 foot there, cause my truck, it's pretty close to the curb when
Yeah.
we don't park it in there. I mean, it was built a long time ago, right? But just for a visual as to
Yeah.
what 15 is versus 20, mine's probably closer to 15 than it is 20.
And any garage that exists today or whenever you enact an ordinance, they're all considered grandfathered in. So if you reduce the setback, or if you find that you have a garage today that's, when they set it at 25 feet, if you had a garage that was closer than 25 feet, they allow it to remain as long
Right,
as
not
it
gonna make them move
remains. Yeah, so this would, any changes would apply to any new garages, and really, you probably have 4 to 5, maybe even 6 properties right now that are waiting, that they wanna build a garage, they're waiting for you to take a look at the ordinance and probably modify it. And in this case, there's 3 modifications that are being proposed.
I personally can see a debate for both, right? The 20 that Nick talked about kind of gives you a fail-safe, right? You don't have to really enforce much. If they just pull up to the garage, you're always going to be safe. Yet, there already is the ordinance where if you got a longer vehicle, you better put it in the garage, right? I mean, don't let it stick out. Or if you got a boat sticking there that's 20 foot long, guess what? You know, so
That comes to common sense.
yeah, I mean, so I personally am honestly could go either way. And it's just a matter of the city having to enforce the 15-foot parking rule, right? I mean, that's where it would come down to, and that probably will never even come up unless someone complains, in all honesty.
All right, can I get a motion on one of these?
Well, let's toss it up, see what the vote comes up to. I will propose or make a motion for accepting the lawyer's recommendations in regards to defining the primary street. Was there 3 things on there?
Yeah, you have the agenda. It's got the 3 of them laid out on the front page. And it's 6A is the front yard, B then
Front
is
yard.
B, yeah, and then C.
That the setback be revised to 15 feet, and the accessory building to be built in the secondary front yard, but still subject to the setback for, as it's worded there. So basically taking the recommendation from the city council proposal. And now it'll be a second and a vote to see if anyone else agrees.
You get a second?
In this case, you are a voting member of the planning commission. So you're able to make motions and make seconds as well too.
I'll
So-
second
Which is
it,
different
yeah.
than the city council, so.
I'll second it. So the
Yep.
motion is, we're gonna go along with the attorney and the motion by the city council to change all 3 of these ordinances.
This third one, C, was that by the council the other night? I don't remember that.
Yes,
Yeah.
That was,
it was to allow accessory buildings into
Right.
that reduced setback. Because you have another ordinance that says you can't build an accessory building in a front yard.
just trying to.
You're not changing the definition of a front yard
Right.
on roads for accessory buildings, but you're allowing,
Under this
Secondary.
new step.
you know. Because then once you set the setback lower, then you need to also change the ordinance that allows them to build into that area then too, so.
All right, there's a motion and second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to 1. Motion carried.
So this would then go to the city council then?
Back to the council.
At the city council then, our ordinances say that when you change the zoning code, there's a public hearing. So at the city council then, there would be a public hearing, and it would be a hearing on your recommendations in here. The city council right now is set for Monday, the 21st of September.
Okay. Number 7, anything others, matters authorized by law, and
Got
ain't
nothing?
nothing I know of. I can make a motion to adjourn then.
There you go.
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Thank you, gentlemen.
7:07.